share with you my new piece of A Great Nut Caper. It tells the story of two squirrels caught in an adventurous chase, and it has a special focus on the brass section of the orchestra, for which I used Synchron Brass, Synchron Special Brass, and VSL Studio Brass lineup. I had a ton of fun composing this piece, and I hope you enjoy A Great Nut Caper! Roll it! Yeah, let's get started. Now, if we take a look at the clarinets over here, they're playing a slurred legato on the last count of each bar right here, on this da-da-da-da-da right there. And I did that because when I was studying John Powell's score for How to Train Your Dragon 2, I noticed that sometimes he has the clarinets for the fast passages slur their notes rather than attacking on each one. So here we have the violas, of course they attack each note right here on the staccato, but the clarinet slur it to connect it a little bit more. I hope that it helps add a little bit of phrasing to that line. So you can hear that little connectedness with them, and it's really cool. Midway through, we have the violins joining, of course, and I doubled these with the flutes to add a little bit of air, and of course the piccolo, an octave above, it helps speak it out a little bit more. And then at the end, we have a harp run that leads us into the next measure. And that harp run also is coupled with the basses and cello over here. Now, their line, you can see for most of it, they're playing the root note, this D right here. At the end, their part expands a little bit more into this right here, these 6 notes right here, and they go along with the harp to help ease the transition into bar 6 over here. So over here, that together, it will sound like this. And after that, we have, of course, the high ones up here, all flutes, all oboes, and the English horn. Then we have horn, trombone, and muted trumpet playing these large, giant random major chords along with the choir over here. It almost creates some sort of like whimsical effect. You can see how large these chords are, and of course I may have forgotten to change a few notes, but it adds character. And if we hear it together on these large chords, this is how it will sound. See here, it almost sounds like really larger than life, even though we're not really using any low instrument here. Most of the lows are, of course, playing the same part from earlier, but the trombones down here just add so much alongside the low choir that we hear. So if we were to just take choir and just trombones, you can still see it. It still sounds quite rich. Has that little richness to it that really helps it stand out in the mix. Because if we just have the high woodwinds and the horns and the trumpets, they might sound a little too thin, and adding those trombones and the low choir really help to solidify that part and make it come out a little bit better. Now moving on to this section. Originally, I got the idea for the piccolo trumpet to be on the melody from John Powell's score for That Christmas. I believe it was the first cue that had the main theme stated on the horns and the piccolo trumpet an octave above, and I've always wanted to try that out. And luckily for me, Synchron Special Brass comes with a piccolo trumpet that they sample just like the rest of Synchron Brass. Cool thing is, with this part, with the main melody, the entire thing works without a piccolo trumpet. If we were to remove the piccolo trumpet, it would still work fantastically. If I were to just solo the brass here and the percussion. So it still works. The horns sound great here, doing a fantastic job. But of course, that piccolo trumpet just adds a little more brightness to the melody, and it helps really bring out the main theme a lot more in this piece. So if we keep it in with the piccolo trumpet, of course, we have the main theme stated in its full. Hear that piccolo trumpet, it really doesn't stick out too much in the melody, with the exception of a few couple high notes right here, like especially up here. But regardless, it works really well with adding that little brilliance to it. It was really cool to combine the horns here with the oboe up an octave. The oboe adds a really nice color to the horns. And instead of having it be a little too dark sounding, the oboes add a little brightness to the sound, and it works really well with the horns overtones. So already sounds great. It's very balanced already, works awesome. But if we had the oboes up an octave and English horn doubling on the same octave as the horns, it adds a lot more depth to it, and I think it really brings out that part a lot more. So you can hear how the oboe an octave higher adds a little bit of reediness to the sound and a little brightness, and it really helps bring it out in that dense, really a lot of stuff going on. It really just brings it out a lot more with the horns. So it's a cool trick I learned you can do in your own stuff. So with the horns in one octave and double it with oboes an octave higher really helps bring out the melody a lot more. And for the basses, we also have this cool syncopated rhythm. It's of course doubled with the timpani. You can see the basses are playing this syncopated rhythm right here on the root note, while the celli have a few notes on the octave jump to help create that motion, because basses tend to drag behind a little on faster notes. I kept basses only on the important accents alongside the timpani, and allowed the celli to play a few more notes to help add that little motion to keep it going. really adds something new to the bass's sound instead of having it be a single note at a time, just like ba ba ba. Instead of that, we have ba da 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 da. And it really just opens up that sound a lot more. Next part leads us with the trumpet soloist. So we have the trumpet soloist, and I have it doubling. I think it's the children's choir and the whistle, and it sounds really cool over here. It almost sounds a little Western, right? Anyway, cool thing about this is if we take away the horns, of course, it will work perfectly. This was originally how I wrote it. But the horns add that little extra oomph to the entire phrase, and it really just brings it out a lot more. Cool thing about this is you see this triplet passage right here with all these notes. This is entirely the same chord as the first one that we landed on, except I changed the voicing to drop down a chord tone by each one. So, for example, if we were to go to the horns, you can see it starts with the D, A, D. So just drop in the notes, and this is the F sharp and the D major chord. D right here, and then an A. So, cool thing about this is motion can come just from changing the voicings. Most of these chords, you can see it, they all share similar notes with each other, but a few changes in between them can really bring that little extra pinch of emotion that can help bring out a part more. So this part over here, we have the huge chords that we heard in the piece, and for this one, let's take a look at the brass. So for this part, I kept most of the bass parts. They're all doubling the same notes of the tuba and the bass trombone. So I kept them either in octaves or in unison because it allows the rest of the large chord above to speak more clearly and it doesn't get too muddy. The trombones add a little bit of it. Then of course we have flutes, piccolo, clarinets. They're all doubling each other in octaves. Same thing with the violins. They're just playing in unison for flutes, like usual. And alongside the brass hits, we also have the men's choir doing a bit of doubling alongside the trombones. And then if you compare it to the normal version, where it's below the middle C, you can hear the difference that having the trombones voiced lower makes. Because I knew the horns and piccolo trumpet would have trouble reaching those high notes if I were to make them play the same part from earlier, but up a whole step. So instead of forcing it out, I decided I would just lead into the note on the next downbeat by going up instead of making such a large jump for them. So then we slam into this giant surprise chord over here with everyone. And over here, I have the violins and the high woodwinds. They're all played different runs. You can see these inner lines right here, especially right here. The English horn, and this line right here, the violas. They all play different runs to help drive into that downbeat with the melody again. And of course, the harp does a descending glissando into the downbeat to also help with that. You can see right here, at the harp right here, you can see how it just goes down like that. With just the brass here. I'm going to show you with the horns, and you can see how there's 5 notes stacked up on each other. And of course, the tuba right here, technically you shouldn't really be doing this, but the third is usually the weakest note when you're playing in a bass, and I want that little bit of instability when they played. So I kept tuba up high. Of course, we resolved back down to the tonic with that. With the basses over here, how I did the basses was that my goal was that I would keep the basses descending. So you see how they start on the same note in the cello, and they keep going lower. As they go lower, it really helps unclutter the range, to not clutter the trombone's speaking range. It's really nice. So keeping them playing a descending figure in unison really helps open it up. So you can hear as it gets lower, that range for the trombones to really speak out its part, it just opens up with each measure as it goes on, as we descend. So these last two notes, and they're spread across most of the orchestra, and they lead us into this climax, and we have huge stabs where everything, pretty much everything's playing together on these chords. Alongside that, we also, the only exception was the woodwinds. We have flutes, clarinet, and octaves with the piccolo too, and they just double the violins and most of the tune percussion over here that you can see. So if we were to solo them by themselves. So my goal for them, I wanted them to have a fast line in unison to help drive this part, because while each big hit that we can see every 2 counts, like one boom, and then on the 3rd count we hear another large attack from the orchestra, these parts in unison really help drive it into the next hit, and it helps with each decay of each hit. In my experience, low brass is much more forgiving compared to string voicings if we were to do this. So if we were to take this, like, spread them out into open voicings like fifths, then that would be no problem. But the way brass works is really nice with its overtones. You can stack lower chords and it will still work beautifully if I were to drop this down an octave. Like if you were to do, let's say we do cello and basses like that, that would be a nightmare to fix in arrangement. But the brass works extremely well when it comes to block voicings and low voicings. It can do all of it. So next up we have brass and choir, and they play this really cool chord. Let me show you how it sounds by itself. While the horns right here, you can see their part right here, they lead us even more by upping one note they're playing, and of course this is really clashing with the trumpet part over here, and that sounds so cool. And with the horns, I'm also doubling them with the glockenspiel and tubular bells and crotales, and it has a really nice texture because those tune percussion really bring out the horn part a little bit better. I want to show it by itself. With the trombone up here, you see the trombones. So with this counter, I felt that it didn't have enough weight, so I doubled this with the bassoons and the violas, and it brought out a lot of more weight to the sound. And we also have the horns over here. They're doing a little cheeky octave rip up here. See how they go from the E to the E above right here, a little octave rip. And it helps bring out the last note, because that last note is also the same note that the trumpets are playing up the octave. So by having the horns play the trumpets an octave and then having the horns jump to the same octave the trumpets were playing, it really brings out that last note a lot more and punches it. And of course, you know, horn rips are fun. You gotta keep it in, man. It's really fun. It was really cheeky, and I thought it would be nice to keep it in. And after that, if we were to hear it in context with everything. Anyway, that's all for this breakdown. I hope you learned something or found this useful, even if it's just 1 or 2 things that you picked up. Special thanks to Paul from VSL for having me return to do this for you guys, and thanks to Michael Yang for mastering this track. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you so much for watching.